Talk to Arthur. Yesterday was his wedding anniversary. Obviously, Adina's birthday, but the achievement is a wedding anniversary. How long have you been married for,
How
mate?
many years? Well, when did I get married? Come on, it's not difficult.
You got married in 2001.
No, in 2000, married 24 years.
In December, that's right.
Ah.
Yeah, in
Yeah,
December.
the
I
10th.
remember you living together in 2001 in January, but you were married in December. That's right. Mazel tov,
Yeah.
mate. It's 24 years. It's incredible. People can't go
So
20.
none of my kids are up to the age of 18 now.
No, but
So
it's
I'm trying to get them out.
most people can't
They
go for
just keep
24
staying.
months. All right, let us
Yeah.
get started. So Gavin was exhausted yesterday. He had a bit of a day and he was nodding off. Not your fault, Gav. So what do you remember from yesterday, Gavin?
I remember very clearly that I was nodding off.
Okay,
Damon, so can we dedicate
I
this
think what you
shirt to
spoke about. Hmm?
just
people
hang,
that passed
hang
away
on.
this week?
Who we do we dedicate it to, Kev?
Well, Gavin knows Ian Meltzer's mom, Faye Meltzer, and Anthony Siegel, who was very involved with the CSO.
Sure. Sure, we'll do a dedication to them. Absolutely. You'll show me pictures afterwards
Oh.
so that I can have them in
Hmm.
mind. So that it's
Okay.
much
Oh, I
more
don't
clear.
have pictures of them.
All
I
right.
don't have pictures of
So,
them.
so
I'll talk
basically, yesterday,
of
the summary,
Anthony.
what happened yesterday. Okay.
Just 1 second. That Anthony Siegel was a youngster, eh? Like
Yeah, our
rail.
age.
Yeah, he was our age group, and he went to help somebody. He's a Krav Maga expert, and he got
Yeah,
entangled with these guys. Actually, targeted. It was a hit. It's very
it was a
sad.
hit. Yeah,
Our
yeah,
Wow.
age group,
yeah.
Oh.
with Meltzer, the age group, it's a mother. I'm sure she was in her late 80s or something like that. It's a little bit better, but this was horrific.
What do you
Yeah,
mean they
yeah.
just assaulted him or it was a
He
what?
was trying
No,
to
it was
help
a
some
hit.
people that were in a bit of a mess. I don't want to go into it now on the show. I'll tell you privately, but he was there was some guy that was having a lot of problems with some very bad rubbish in this in society in general, low end people, and he was trying to get this guy out of this mess. He shouldn't have got involved in the first place, and then they targeted him as a result. This gang targeted him as a result. Four people came to his dojo as if they were going to be students, and he started training them, and they pulled out guns and they shot him to death. It's terrible.
God.
And he left behind, I think, an ex-wife, but two kids.
No, they're CPR. They're still married. Yeah,
They're still married.
yeah.
I thought it was the ex, but I don't know him. So and there was a picture of him. I would have pulled it up if I had it, but it was on Facebook.
Okay. I'm sorry.
All right, so that's quite
Mm.
a big one. All right, so let's do it in his honor, and
So Kev,
obviously
I
in.
tell you
Faye
what,
Meltzer.
I want you guys to start, and then I will send. Before you start, Arthur, you had a question.
No, I was going to say what the summary was from yesterday, if you wanted to know.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so yesterday we were discussing about let's say you falsely testify against someone for 100,000 or 200,000 shekels, right? And before you pay it, they are they are caught or they confess. And we were discussing whether it was the actual money they had to pay. The what do you call the guys that lie? Mine's gone blank. Anyway, you know what I'm talking
Adam
about.
Zimmerman.
Yeah, Adam
Well,
Zimmerman.
Athens or the men.
Yeah.
Okay. They obviously have to split up, and you're discussing whether it was a penalty, okay, or compensation. And at the end of the thing, I think the result was actually it's a. I think we discussed. I think it was a Was it a compensation at the end
Arthur, it's a good
because of
summary.
his time?
Depends according to
No,
who's.
no, no. Sorry, sorry. There was a
Yeah.
penalty because he actually never lost any money. The guy that was accused. It was before it happened. Obviously, not like if he executes someone, he never actually paid the 200,000, and the Zimmerman whatever we found out before.
Excellent. All right, so Kev, before you get started, let's just finish on this. If we need more time, we'll do another link, but we might not need it. It's not going to be a long share because we're going to another Mishnah and we don't have long left on this. So let's just go through it. But that incident was terrible, Gavin. I didn't know. All right.
Yeah, sorry. That's the only reason why I raised it, because it's out of the ordinary.
Terrible. So what we said was that it started off that there was a brisa quoted that Rabbi Akiva, apparently that was said in the name of Rabbi Akiva, that Adem Zomimim, conspiring or plotting witnesses, don't pay the Hazama penalty. The Hazama penalty is a reciprocal penalty on the basis of their own confession. And we want to know what Rabbi Akiva's reasoning is. And it's because he considers the Hazama penalty a fine rather than compensation. And one doesn't pay a fine by his own admission, but only on the basis of evidence. So when you learned Bava Kama 64b, it had this entire pasuk of Shmot, which is Exodus chapter 22, verse 8. And it says, to whom the judges will find guilty shall pay twofold to his fellow. And what it's talking about is the kefil, the double payment imposed on a thief, which basically means that if you stole 100 zuz, then you'd have to pay 100 zuz back to back to the victim. And in addition to that, well, that would be compensation for the principal. There would be a fine that would mimic that 100% compensation. So you're paying twice. Okay. But the only time that you pay twofold is when the judges found that person guilty through the testimony of witnesses. And we said there that it's because you're aggravating the court and you wasting a lot of time. But if you convict yourself by your own admission, all you have to do is pay back what you stole. And that's the basis on what we're saying, is that if Rabbi Akiva considers the reciprocal penalty a fine, if you bring it up before it's brought up by a second set of witnesses, then you don't pay a fine by his own admission. So there would have to be one or two things. Is that at the point where the judges pass a verdict, it would be too late there, Lance. Because if it uses the term to whom the judges find guilty, and they find this innocent defendant guilty, then at that point the reciprocal penalty kicks in, even if a second set of witnesses haven't appeared at that point, because the judges found the person guilty. That could be the one way of looking at it. The other way is if the verdict was guilty, and it hasn't been carried out yet, but a second set of witnesses have not appeared, and the person admitted it, do we say that that would also count? So we're going to go through a number of issues, but either way, it would have to be before the second set of witnesses appeared. But my intuition would be it would have to be before the guilty verdict. Otherwise, your own admission doesn't count the minute the judges issue a verdict. Okay. One other thing that you've got to bear in mind is the other opinion. Not everybody agrees with Rabbi Akiva. So Arthur brought a good logic for Rabbi Akiva. The reason why the Adem Zomimim considered to be fined with a reciprocal penalty is it's not compensation. They haven't cost the victim anything because they were caught out as Adem Zomimim before the verdict was implemented. And therefore, the victim hasn't lost any of his own money, so it's not compensation. When they paid the victim the 100 zuz they sought to cost him, they hadn't cost the victim anything because the second set of witnesses appeared before the transfer of money that the victim would have to pay to the plaintiff. Okay, so therefore, according to that logic, it is a penalty. Because compensation would be exactly what you cost the victim. There was no cost to the victim. The other thing is that the Tanakama opinion would be its compensation. On what basis, Arthur, would it be compensation?
It would be compensation if he had actually paid the money. And they have to pay
No,
him back.
because if he paid the
No.
money, then excellent.
No,
I'm
yeah,
pleased Arthur
yeah,
brought
okay.
this up. No. I'm pleased Arthur brought this up because we do not give the reciprocal penalty once the verdict has been implemented. They don't get the kapora, the atonement, in this world of getting a reciprocal penalty. We learned that in Sanhedrin when in the 89th daf, when basically the Eidim Zomimim were successful and they executed the Bas Kohen and the accused lover, neither of which had had an affair, then if the execution was carried out on the victims, the Eidim Zomimim don't get the death penalty. If the second set of witnesses came to testify, the first set were not at that location, but the verdict hadn't been carried out with the execution, then the Eidim Zomimim get the reciprocal penalty. You with me? So in that case, it's not compensation because the compensation would be to pay back what they cost. So I want to tweak Arthur's wording slightly. So there are those opinions that hold that it would suffice to have, Lance, we're going to ask something. It would suffice to have the verdict given. And then if the verdict was given, but not carried out, because there was a second set of witnesses, in that particular case, they're giving us compensation because the verdict is meant the court wanted to grant the extraction of money from the victim, and therefore it's not about intent, it's about the verdict. Just like the verdict said that this defendant had to lose 200 zuz because of the Eidim Zomimim, so too we take 200 zuz from them and pay the victim. So Arthur's right in that it didn't actually transpire in a loss, which is Rabbi Akiva's opinion, so therefore it's a fine. But the Rabboni's opinion is the verdict is enough to suffice compensation as if it was carried out. Also because of the trauma the person went through. Terrible trauma. So you can see how the rabbis viewed that as compensation. The second factor of why they called it compensation is it's not a set amount. A kanas is generally a set amount or a set percentage. So what about and he shall pay double? That's not a set percentage because you guys once asked, but you could steal something worth 80 zuz, then you have to pay back 160 zuz. I'm not talking about a sheep or cow. Let's just keep it. And if you stole something that was 120 zuz, you'd pay back 240 zuz. So that's not a fixed amount. It might not be a fixed amount, but it's a fixed percentage. So the penalty equals the capital amount. Whatever you paid in compensation, you pay the same percentile back. So it is fixed. It's fixed in terms of paying 100% of what you sought the person to lose in addition to compensation. So since that percentage is fixed, not the amount, it also is considered a fine. Do you get what I'm saying? Apart from the compensatory nature. So let's just go through that. So Rava said the Gemara wanted to find some sort of support for Rabbi Akiva, and they found it because Rava said, recognize that this is so because they're not actually done anything, and yet they executed and they pay the reciprocal penalty. He's talking about the death penalty case of Eidim Zomimim in Sanhedrin. So it's clear from that they're paying the penalty can't be a form of compensation because the victim hasn't lost his life yet based on the accusation of the Eidim Zomimim. So therefore he's saying exactly what Arthur said originally, is that the victim actually didn't lose his life, according to Rava. It was attempted to do so, and therefore, because there's a reciprocal punishment that they get the death penalty, it's a fine. It wasn't compensation. Rav Nachman was talking about a financial case, and he said the money which they testified is still in the hands of the rightful owner, and yet they paid the hazama penalty. So the Gemara basically said was, what has Rav Nachman added to Rava? Why do we add him? Because it's the same principle. And the Gemara amended and said they're both in agreement, both Rava and Rav Nachman. The one is just talking about a capital case and the other one a monetary case. And they would agree in terms of corporal punishment also. So then the Gemara says, all right, then let's analyze this a little bit more deeply. So there's a statement of Rav that's going to come up. But before we go to Rav, there's a commentary by Rav Yehuda who said in the name of Rav. So just bear in mind, this wasn't said by Rav himself. This was said by one of the students of Rav, which was Rav Yehuda. A Zomim witness pays according to his share. So what does this mean? So it means that this one pays a half and that one pays a half. Each one pays half of the Hazama penalty, and you're going to learn that in the 5th daf. But that's as far as a monetary penalty is concerned. So if they sought to cost the victim 200 zuz, each of the Eidim Zomamim, once proven to be Eidim Zomamim, pay 100 zuz each. But the Gemara is clear, they don't divide a sentence of lashes. Meaning if they sought to cost the victim 40 lashes, which is 39, each one of them gets 39. It's not divided by 2. I don't know if it's because you can't do a half lash and you can't technically divide it by 2, but somehow I don't think so. One of the reasons is because the innocent victims can't stand to make, wouldn't stand to make a profit from people testifying against him. In other words, if they sought to cost him 200 zuz, he doesn't deserve to get 400 zuz, 200 zuz from each party. It's enough that he's compensated for what they sought to damage him, and therefore each of them pays 100. But as far as the lashes are concerned, if you turn around and said, well, why don't they share the lashes? They can't, because you could say to the one of the plotting witnesses, why should you get 20 lashes when you wanted him to get 40? Let you each get 40 and see how it feels. So therefore, we don't split the punishment with regards to lashes, but we do according to the costing of money, because we don't. It's not fair that the defendant make money out of this Eidim Zomamim case either. And you could say, but then the one of the conspiring witnesses doesn't know what it's like to feel 200 zuz. But the point of it is his testimony alone wouldn't have cost 200 zuz. His testimony only contributed to half the loss. Okay, so we're saying if this is the case, why do we need Rav Yehuda to have taught this rule in the name of Rav? And maybe you could say, according to the Gemara, that in the case of only one of the witnesses, and he was proven to be conspiring, but not the other. And therefore, Rav teaches that he pays half of the penalty that should be his. Even the partner hasn't been a conspiring witness and will pay nothing. So let's just give 2 scenarios. Arthur was spot on the mark. And that is, you've got, after the verdict was given, you've got a set of witnesses that turn around and say, listen, there's Reuven and Shimon. We can't account for Shimon, but Reuven, we know, couldn't have witnessed this crime in Santon that he accused the defendant of, because he was with us in Plettenberg Bay. And therefore, we can prove that this particular witness was conspiring, and therefore he should pay his share. So that's what's proposed in the Gemara. Okay? There's and then we also mentioned a case which seemed confusing to you guys yesterday. I don't want to get into it, but you could have more than 2 witnesses. You need a minimum of 2 witnesses to convict, but you could have more than 2 witnesses. So if there were 3 and the 3 witnesses were going to cost the defendant, say for example, 300 zuz, then the one that was convicted of by other second set of witnesses of not, sorry, accused by another set of witnesses of not being there, and they had evidence to that, he only pays his share. But let's not focus on that, because I don't want to confuse you guys, but it's worked out in a fair manner. But the problem that the Gemara has with Rav Yehuda's teaching of Rav is that we learned in a brisa that a plotting witness doesn't pay money unless both of them are found to be Eidim Zomamim. In other words, if you have a second set of witnesses and they prove that one of the witnesses is a plotting witness, we don't make him pay his share. So in order to trigger the reciprocal punishment, both witnesses have to be found to be zomimim in this case, because on the testimony of one witness, a person is not convicted. So therefore, Rav's teaching can't be referring to this case. So if you don't hold by Rav Yehuda quoting Rav, then we have a different quote of Rav, and that's by Rava, R-A-V-A. Now, Rava says, look, it's talking about a case of self-recrimination. In other words, he feels bad, and he admitted that he lied. In other words, there's not a secondary set of witnesses that accused him of being in a different place. He basically said, I feel bad, I lied, and I was a plotting witness. But, this is wonderful, but the other person's not admitting to being a plotting witness. So as we're saying in that particular case, he must pay the penalty, but not more than his share. Does that all make sense, guys? In other words, according
Just
to
repeat that last one. Sorry, I didn't hear you clearly.
Okay, according to Rav Yehuda on Rav, he's saying that it's a case of a second set of witnesses proving that one of the witnesses was a plotting or conspiring witness, and therefore he pays his share. But the problem with that is we do learn in a brisa. I don't know what Rav Yehuda will do with that brisa. He won't say that that brisa is invalid, or we don't interpret it that way. But because there is a brisa that says that you can't convict one of the Eidim Zomimim in terms of the reciprocal penalty unless both are caught being conspiring, we have to do something with that sentence. Now, how does a conviction take place? Only given with a second set of witnesses. So then what leaves the other choice? The only other choice that's left is a choice where basically somebody self-incriminates and says, I felt bad, I lied. And the other person isn't admitting to being an Eid Zomim. He's just not admitting to it. So then, according to Rava's opinion of Rav, he's saying, well, then that person that admitted to have lied must pay only his share. And that's not in contradiction to the brisa. We're going to see how it unfolds with Rabbi Akiva now. Yeah?
That being the case, so the second set of witnesses says that one of the guys in the first set was lying, therefore that guy pays his share. But what about the second part? Does that mean that the victim is going to get shortchanged?
No, there is in that particular case, the victim isn't going to be, because once you prove one of them's a liar, the case there would be two situations. Lance is asking a good question. If there are two witnesses and there's one left, then it's not enough to convict. So the person would pay a reciprocal penalty without that, we knowing that brisa of his share, but the victim wouldn't pay because you don't have two witnesses to convict against him.
Okay, so the person who then pays, the conspiring witness,
but he pays a defendant.
Does he pay the victim, or does he pay the court?
No, not the court.
Okay.
He pays a defendant.
Okay.
But you've got a bit of a problem when it comes to a slightly different case, and that is a case where you've got three witnesses. Now, if one is struck out for being a plotting witness, before we knew about this brisa, he pays that share to the defendant, but he wouldn't obviously be executed, because in terms of that, they would all have to technically be, you can't, do you get what I'm saying? You can't implement something like that. In a monetary case, you can, in lashes, you can, but it might still leave two legitimate witnesses to convict. But without complicating the issue, the brisa comes and says, listen, there's no reciprocal penalty unless all the witnesses are convicted of being Eidim Zomimim. That's the bottom line. So the only thing, I don't know what Rav Yehuda does with Rav's statement about that they share the monetary, which is true. That's across the board. Is that they share the monetary obligations and each one gets lashed. But in this particular case, we have a problem because it's only one of them. So the first suggestion by Rav Yehuda on Rav is that a second set of witnesses come and say that one of the witnesses is had been with us at that particular time and place, and therefore could not have seen the crime, and therefore he's made to pay the reciprocal penalty. And then we learn a brisa saying, but you need all the Eidim Zomimim to be convicted by a second set of witnesses in order that there's a reciprocal penalty. And then the only thing that Rava says on Rav is that it's different in the case of the testimony of the witness by his own admission. Because as far as he's concerned, if you admit to something yourself, then there's no reason why you can't pay. You can pay, you can lose all your money in the casino for all you care. Nobody can stop you of how you spend your money. If you want to give the defendant back his money, you can. So if you admit to lying, you can pay, but you don't have to pay everybody's share. You just pay with what you sought to cost this person. Okay? Of what you sought to cost this person. Now, the Gemara asks, but can such a thing even occur? Because does the Gemara accept his retraction when he admits to perjuring himself? And there is a rule, and we learned this, guys, in Bava Kama. Once a witness has testified and his testimony has been completed and written down by the stenographer, he can't alter his testimony. And anything he says which changes his original testimony is inadmissible at court. So therefore, the court can certainly not accept testimony that he lied, because what would go is the testimony that he originally gave. And if the court doesn't accept his retraction of that testimony, in other words, it's saying if he said he lied, fine, that's new testimony. But in order to go back and make him pay, he has to say, I want to retract what I said because I was lying. And therefore, there's no basis for obligating to pay the hazama penalty. Why? Because if he does testify, he can't retract his testimony, and therefore he can't self-incriminate in this particular case, because if the other witness stays firm and there's a verdict, he's going to have to live with his conscience, because that is done against the defendant. Because we still have one defendant that's holding true that this is what's happened. Do you see the problem? Yes or no? He can't retract his testimony. That's the problem with this. So he's saying, can even such a thing be true? So then we've got to rephrase Rava's explanation of Rav, because clearly it doesn't mean that. So what does it mean? It's the Gemara says rather the case to which Rav is where he comes before a court and says, myself and another person testified, and we were actually found to be zomamim in such and such a court. In other words, in another court. So they got a secondary court. And he said, listen, I want to admit that myself and another person testified, and we were found to be conspiring witnesses in another court. But if you admit that and they ran away from that court. So if you admit to being found a zomim in another court, you're actually admitting that you already owe a penalty. So that's not firstly, it's not a retraction of testimony at all. It's an admission of liability. And it concerns this court, and there's no reason for them not to accept this admission and make him pay for it. What's the proof? Well, the proof is very simple. We said in terms of that verse in Shmot, we were basically saying that in Shmot chapter 22 verse 8, to whom the judges were found guilty, he has to pay a penalty, pays twofold to his fellow, or any penalty. So here the judges found this person guilty in another court, as well as somebody else as Eidim Zomimim. So now he can't get off by his own admission because he's already been found guilty. It's only when you found by your own admittance before there's judgment. In that particular case, you don't get to pay the hazama penalty because why? You haven't troubled the court for judgment, nor witnesses. So we then going to come to a slight problem. So we're saying the first thing is before we deal with Rabbi Akiva's problem, the issue is here, you can only convict yourself when in fact you've been made guilty in another court for two reasons. Number one, you have already been judged guilty in another court, and therefore admittance won't get you off the hook. So then you pay the hazama penalty when you admit that you ran away from the other court. The second thing of it is it's no longer retraction of testimony because that testimony has stuck in another court. You can't retract testimony. This is a new case in a new court. So before we get back to this, Kevin, do you want to teach us? We got 3 minutes.
Yes, okay. So I wanted to say something about Hanukkah, but let's rather leave that for tomorrow. So this, in going back to Parashat Noach, I don't know if you guys were aware that Hashem chose Parashat Noach not because he was a Torah scholar or he was a massive tzaddik. He had a lot of derech eretz and was friendly to everybody and was kind, and he didn't discriminate amongst people based on their status. And this is mentioned by Darren Platsky, Shir on Aloha. He brought this in at the end of his shir that derech eretz kadma Torah, derech eretz like kadima comes before Torah. That's part of that's one of the components that all of us need to have in place. And so that was why he chose him, not because of lofty spiritual reasons, but because of his derech eretz and the way he treated people with kindness and friendliness and darchei noam, ways of sweetness. So not easy for people, not easy for any of us or anyone to completely be that way inclined 24/7, 365 days a year. But we should try and keep it in mind that it's still very high regarded. Some people can be extremely holy and learned, but sometimes they're not nice people. I don't know many of these people. I haven't, and I hope I don't come across them, but they don't have derech eretz, and they're just sometimes not nice. And they have an attitude. Actually, I have come across some people like that, unfortunately, not too many. And they're just not nice people, and they shouldn't be wearing the garb if they're going to behave like that. Anyway, so just thought I remembered what he said, so I just thought I'd add that to this forum here.
I tell you what concerns me about what you said. He said, I've come across many and you've only come across a few. That's the difference.
Welcome to Joburg.
Yeah.
Yeah.